A British monk named Pelagius challenged Augustine with ideas that would force the Church to wrestle with the deepest questions about human nature and God's healing power. Picture Augustine in his study in Hippo around 412, reading letters that disturbed him deeply. Reports had reached North Africa about a charismatic teacher from Britain who was spreading ideas that seemed to contradict everything Augustine had learned about salvation. This monk, named Pelagius, possessed a brilliant mind and sincere devotion to Christian living. He inspired many followers with his calls for moral excellence and spiritual discipline. Pelagius taught that humans could choose to live without sin if they simply tried hard enough, making God's grace helpful but not strictly necessary for salvation. He argued that God created people with free will that remained completely intact even after Adam's fall. According to Pelagius, every person possessed the natural ability to choose good over evil in every situation. Sin resulted from bad choices rather than any fundamental corruption of human nature. People could achieve perfect righteousness through determined effort and careful attention to divine commands. This teaching appealed to many Christians who wanted clear guidance about how to live holy lives. Pelagius offered a straightforward message that put responsibility squarely on individual shoulders. He told his followers that they possessed everything necessary to please God completely. No excuses existed for moral failure because God had given everyone sufficient strength to resist temptation. Pelagius challenged Christians to stop making excuses and start living up to their full potential. The British monk pointed to biblical examples of people who had lived righteously before Christ came to earth. He argued that if Old Testament saints could please God without Christian sacraments or special grace, then surely Christians with access to Christ's teaching could do even better. Pelagius insisted that God would never command something impossible to achieve. Since Scripture commands perfection, human perfection must be attainable through natural human effort combined with divine instruction. Augustine disagreed deeply with these teachings, remembering his own struggles with divided will and the grace that finally freed him in the garden under the fig tree. The bishop recalled his years of knowing what was right, but lacking the power to choose it consistently. Augustine remembered crying out in frustration about his inability to simply decide to follow God, and then do it without internal conflict. His personal experience convinced him that human nature carried wounds that good intentions alone could never heal. Augustine had tried to live righteously through his own strength during his years as a Manichaean, and later as a seeker influenced by Platonic philosophy. He possessed excellent education, strong motivation, and clear understanding of moral principles. Yet Augustine found himself repeatedly choosing lesser goods over greater ones, temporary pleasures over lasting satisfaction, earthly ambitions over spiritual peace. His will seemed divided against itself in ways that mere effort could not overcome. Augustine taught that our wills are wounded and that God's healing grace is needed for true, lasting change. Pelagius emphasized human effort and natural ability to choose good consistently. Augustine explained that fallen humans retain the ability to choose between various earthly goods, but they lack the power to choose God above all earthly things without grace healing their disordered loves. People can decide between different careers, spouses, or lifestyles through natural reasoning. But the fundamental choice to love God supremely requires divine intervention to restore what sin had damaged in the human heart. This was not about God forcing anyone against their will, but about grace restoring the freedom to choose what our hearts truly long for beneath all their confused desires. Augustine taught that grace does not override human choice, but repairs the human capacity for making right choices. Divine assistance enables people to want what they should want and to find strength for pursuing what their renewed hearts desire most deeply. Augustine emphasized that salvation comes as a gift rather than as a reward for human effort or moral achievement. He argued that no one could earn divine favor through good works, because even the desire to do good works comes from God's grace. This did not make human effort meaningless, but it meant that every step toward God depended on divine initiative and assistance. Augustine taught that people cooperate with grace rather than earning it. The church councils sided largely with Augustine and condemned Pelagian teaching as heretical. However, the underlying issues continued to surface throughout church history in various forms. Medieval theologians, Protestant reformers, and modern Christians have all wrestled with similar questions about the relationship between human responsibility and divine sovereignty. Augustine's insights about grace became central to both Catholic and Protestant understanding of how God saves sinful humanity. His synthesis influenced Thomas Aquinas, Martin Luther, John Calvin, and countless other theologians who built on his foundation while sometimes disagreeing about specific details. Both traditions affirmed that salvation comes through divine grace rather than human merit, though they developed different ways of explaining how grace and human choice work together. This debate shaped how Christians think about prayer, responsibility, and hope. Augustine's wisdom reminds us that God's grace does not override human choice, but heals the heart's ability to choose love. His own journey from restless searching to peaceful surrender shows how divine mercy can transform even the most conflicted souls into vessels of wisdom and compassion. Tonight, let us rest in the truth that every searching heart can find its way home. Augustine's journey from restless youth to wise bishop shows us that God can use even our wanderings to prepare us for the work we're called to do. The boy and his small theft became a window into a heart that would keep searching until it found rest in God. The student who chased after wisdom found the source of all truth. His life reminds us that the longest journeys home often begin with the smallest steps. A stolen pear taught him about sin. A mother's faithful prayers surrounded him with grace. A child's voice in a garden brought him peace at last. As you rest now, imagine your own small steps home as part of a gentle path that leads toward the God who has been calling your name all along.